Where's everyone going? Bingo?
Which Resident Evil 4 is the best? This is the extremely difficult question that we must now ask ourselves, since the remake is a masterpiece just like the original. Somehow, Capcom was able to take a game that was basically already perfect and they remade it in a way that honors and pays proper homage to the original, while also modernizing, improving, and refining it to the very limit, and adding enough new twists and spins on it that it is still able to surprise and thrill veterans like myself that have played the original dozens upon dozens of times. It is rare that a remake can equal the original, and it's even rarer for the remake to surpass the original. But if someone can manage this, it's definitely Capcom, since they have shown that they are the masters of remaking games. The remake of Resident Evil 4 proves that they are indeed very much deserving of this title. They have created a remake quite worthy of the original, to the point that it is very difficult to decide which of the two is better. In fact, there might not even be a right answer to this question, but I will still do my best to come up with one. To begin, I have to provide some context. Namely, I have to explain what makes the original Resident Evil 4 such a masterful and a special game. Not just to me, but to other people as well. For me specifically, this was, for all intents and purposes, my first Resident Evil game. I say it like this because technically, my first Resident Evil game was the remake for the first one on the GameCube. However, I played this with two of my cousins at one of their houses, so it wasn't even my game or my console, and we took turns playing it. Plus, we were all just terrified out of our minds and we had no idea what to do. After a good amount of time wandering aimlessly while on the edge of our seats, we gave up. Resident Evil 4 was the first one I played on my own, and the first one I completed, though this was after overcoming my fear of it. At first, I was way too scared to play it, but once I overcame my fear, I was able to get through it, and it was an unforgettable, remarkable, and a truly special gaming experience like none other at the time. After completing it, I immediately went for another playthrough, and then another one, and another one. I ended up becoming obsessed with the game. I'm talking dressing up like Leon, styling my hair like him, being able to quote the entire game, playing the game every day, and making the entire arsenal of the game, knives and Leon's best/holsters included, out of cardboard. This last one is something that happened again due to the remake, but that's a story for another day. The point is that the original Resident Evil 4 dominated my life for a while. It was the only game I cared about. The only game I played. It was my favorite game, and pretty much the only thing I thought about. My obsession with it ultimately got me into Resident Evil as a whole, which is still one of my favorite franchises in all of gaming. And it got me into zombie and survival horror games in general, which still remain some of my favorite games to play. Though no other game in the franchise or genre was ever able to surpass Resident Evil 4 for me. It was just such a one-of-a-kind and monumental experience that none could hope to match. My memories of it and all the fun and the fear I felt while playing it remain firmly engraved in my heart. It is and will always be one of my favorite gaming experiences of all time. And I am sure that for one reason or another, a lot of people feel the same way that I do. Now, of course, Resident Evil 4 is a seminal game for more than just my or our own special personal experience and connection with it. It was, at the time, a revolutionary game in more ways than one. Not only did it inject some new flavor into the franchise by ditching the classic fixed camera angles found in the first few games in favor of a third-person over-the-shoulder perspective that got the horror right up in our faces, which also had the effects of moving the emphasis of combat from movement and positioning to precision aiming and reflexes, and of shifting the series from pure horror into a blend of action and horror, but it also changed the landscape of gaming as a whole by creating a gameplay experience unlike any seen before, thus creating a new genre and influencing countless games that came after. It is this status as a monumental milestone in gaming and as a magical experience like no other before it, and dare I say since it, that makes the original Resident Evil 4 a difficult game to surpass, even when compared to its arguably superior remake. Because yes, objectively speaking, the remake is the better game. And I don't mean technically speaking, which it of course is, because I think that it's not fair to compare a game from 2005 with a game from 2023 based on graphics, sound, gameplay, etc. Since games have come a very long way in 18 years. Instead, when I say that objectively speaking, the remake is the better game, I mean in terms of story and the characters, which are not really affected by time. At least not as much as the technical stuff. If anything, some of the best stories and characters in video game history can be found in older games. But anyways, what I mean is that as far as characters and the story goes, we can compare the two games. And the remake wins out, for the most part, in said comparison.
Hey, I see you found your missing señorita.
Senorita has a name and it's Ashley.
Ashley was annoying, to say the least, in the original game, both as a character and during gameplay.
Leon! Help! Help!
Plus, she was also more of a handful. She wouldn't even climb down a ladder on her own, requiring instead that Leon catches her. But all of this no longer holds true in the remake. Character-wise, she is now 100% waifu material. And I don't just mean because of her new design. She is now more mature, earnest, caring, vulnerable, charming, elegant, adorable, and kind. She is now a character you genuinely love and care about. Someone you wanted to save and protect. Which, yes, is the whole point of the game. But now it's something you feel and willingly want to do, instead of something that is imposed upon you. This alone vastly improves the game, because now you don't want to help her just because you have to, but also because you want to. Also, in the original game, I did not care that much when she was taken away as part of the story. If anything, it was a welcomed reprieve. But now, I hate it when she is not around, because I just love having her by my side. Her cute and curious comments.
I wonder how much that's worth.
The adorable way she cheers for you in the shooting range.
High score, here we come. Hi. Oh, that was awesome.
All her great interactions with Leon as they grow closer.
Well, yeah, but I'm not used to having such good company.
Is that a compliment?
Take it however you want.
How she always shows concern for Leon after a battle.
Are you okay?
Yeah,
How she shows a lot more concern and love for Leon in general.
I thought you were gonna die.
okay.
All these things make her endearing. You just want her to always be there. And when she isn't, it's a lonelier experience for sure. Especially since, unlike in the original, she is not a mostly silent companion that just follows you around. Instead, she has a lot more to say, which makes her feel alive, like an actual character. She is also just a lot more helpful during the story. Like for example in the battle against Chief Mendez. In the original, Ashley just hides until the battle is over and does nothing during it. In the remake, she helps Leon escape from the flaming building, even going as far as to help him put out the fires on him and stand up. She can even help in a fight, like when she throws lanterns at the knights. Gameplay-wise, adding the ability to tell her to spread out, which makes her stay away and out of trouble for the most part, instead of simply telling her to stay in place like in the original, and the ability to tell her to stick close so that you can outrun enemies instead of loosely following you like in the original, plus the removal of her health bar and thus the need to spend your valuable healing resources on her, all make her less of a liability during combat, especially since one button is all you need to heal her if she is hurt to the point of being incapacitated. Also, you can still have her hide, thus removing her from the equation completely during tough enemy encounters. Finally, in the remake, she actually grows as a character. When Sadler made her almost stab Leon, she was left devastated, utterly terrified by the evil within her, which really makes you feel for her, especially when she tells Leon to stay away because she does not want to hurt him. But after Leon told her that it's okay to be afraid, so long as she does not run away from the source of said fear, she clearly became braver, with an obvious resolve to fight. This was shown best when we get to play as her after she is separated from Leon. This part of the game, which is vastly superior to its equivalent in the original game by the way, shows how capable she can be once she has the willpower to face her fears. At the end of the game, Leon tells her that she does not need him because she proved that she can handle herself. So in the remake, she does not remain a damsel in distress the entire time. Instead, she slowly evolves into a fighter while still remaining herself at heart. This is further enhanced by the fact that she just has more urgency in the remake, doing things like find maps all on her own. Additionally, in the original, the aforementioned situation of having her lose control, which makes her and Leon split up, is just awful by comparison, since she brushes a concerned Leon aside like a brat. Also, in their first meeting, she is distrustful in both games, but in the original, the simple mention of her father makes her trust Leon immediately like a naive child, while in the remake, Leon has to put a little more effort into making her trust him. Both of these moments exemplify just how much more mature she is as a character in the remake. So yes, Ashley is vastly better in the remake. It's honestly quite remarkable just how much they managed to improve her. Prior to the remake, I really did not mind that we don't see her again past Resident Evil 4. But now, since she is in contention for best Resident Evil waifu, I seriously hope that she comes back in a future game. Perhaps she will. This conversation could be hinting at her possible return. Fingers crossed.
Right? Maybe someday I'll become an agent like you. What do you think? We could protect the US from any and all threats.
Hey, Yankee. Got your name?
Leon.
Quiet type, eh? I'm Luis Serra.
Luis was a fairly one-note character with a vague backstory in the original game that did not really get much time to shine. However, in the remake, not only is he given a more extensive backstory through files and pictures that link him directly to the village and its inhabitants, but his work at Umbrella, how he helped the Los Iluminados with Las Plagas, his research, and his dealings with Ada are all given more depth thanks not only to files once more, but also through dialogue and cutscenes. Additionally, he is given a lot more time to shine. he even becomes a sidekick for a little while, helping you fight and to progress through a part of the game while delivering funny dialogue and revealing more of his backstory, and the reason why he is so hell-bent on helping Ashley and Leon. They even made the battle against the two El Gigante a lot better by having it be a 2-on-2 battle with Luis by your side. Not to mention the minecart ride, which is now a lot more exciting and enjoyable. He is also just so much funnier and more charismatic in the remake. Finally, he is a lot more sympathetic in the remake. He is a man tormented by the weight of the sins he committed, and he is just trying to make amends in whatever way he can. He is just searching for redemption, no matter how small it might be or how steep a price he might have to pay for it. All these things combined make his fate, which is the same one as in the original game, just at the hands of someone else, a tragic and very sad affair, especially since his last words are him wondering if he was able to change for the better. His death in the original was just shocking, but in the remake, I truly felt bad for him. And since I knew his fate, I was even hoping that one of the changes made to the original would be changing said fate. Now, of course, in the original game, Luis was also tormented by the things he did, and he also wanted to make amends. However, this was given very little focus or emphasis, unlike in the remake. So you really could not feel his regret and his conviction as strongly. Plus, he got to do much less for Leon and Ashley, so it really did not feel like he did enough to be absolved of his sins. Unlike in the remake, where Leon and Ashley were saved by his medicine, just like in the original, but also by his key, his lab, and his final wish. Plus, since in the original game, he perished before doing much, it felt like he died just as he was turning things around for the better. Unlike in the remake, where he clearly got at least some redemption before his untimely end. Additionally, in the remake, his sacrifice is given more weight since Leon and Ashley honor it by pushing forward, no matter what. He just matters more. In the original, Ashley was never even told about his demise, but in the remake, she is, and she is visibly quite sad about it. Also, it's great that he was added to Mercenaries, where he gets to wield the lance he had briefly.
Then come, Sancho Panza. Let us rescue the Princess Dulcinea.
You're gonna hurt yourself.
Hey, that was my lance.
And he also does this for some reason.
Wouldn't make me use this, would you?
Well, after 6 years, that is one hell of a greeting, Ada.
Ada was kept pretty much the same, which is not really a bad thing since her whole point is acting behind the scenes away from prying eyes, occasionally stepping in to help when needed and when it favors her. However, the remake does give her more screen time, and better yet, her complicated history/relationship with Leon is more prevalent in it. In their first meeting in the original, they felt like strangers, since they did not know who the other was until they were facing each other and Ada took off her sunglasses. But in the remake, right away, they clearly know each other, and they address each other by name. Their subsequent talk and every scene they have together thereafter just ooze with distrust and deep-seated grudges, which is something that the original game did not do. Instead, they always felt like strangers that just so happened to have some connection. Also, unlike in the original, in the remake, Leon is clearly very happy to see her, as shown by this meme-worthy smirk. Now, the fact that she does not appear in Mercenaries anymore and the lack of separate ways and assignment Ada, at least for now, do undoubtedly lessen her influence on the remake, but not enough to diminish the improvements made to her interactions with Leon and to her overall role in the game. Plus, her lack of connection with the next character simplifies things for the better, by making each of them feel more important, since they are each their own individual piece of the greater picture instead of being a small piece of a smaller picture within the larger picture.
Long time no see, rookie.
Major Krauser?
Krauser is another character that felt a bit undercooked in the original. He and Leon clearly had some history together, but it was kept quite vague. Though of course, this is mostly because the Dark Side Chronicles, which revealed said history, was released after the original Resident Evil 4. Additionally, in the original, Krauser's reason for helping the Los Iluminados was not very on brand for him, since he did it on Wesker's orders and for Umbrella's sake, instead of doing it of his own accord and for his own benefit, which suits him much better. However, since the remake was released post Dark Side Chronicles, Leon and Krauser's history is front and center right from the start, with Leon addressing Krauser as Major Krauser instead of just Krauser, immediately establishing a clear connection between them. Having the past that connects them be so clear and prevalent makes their interactions in the remake a lot more personal and engaging. They feel like bitter rivals that were once on the same side, up until their different ideals drove them apart, and now they find themselves on opposite sides. While they are alike in some ways, they are very different in others. Their dynamic is very cool to watch. Better yet, the fact that Krauser trained Leon was not present in the original. But here in the remake, right from the start of the game, this is shown, and only reinforced later when Krauser continuously taunts Leon by calling him a rookie or sloppy, or by saying things like "I don't remember teaching you a move like that." Their teacher-student relationship just adds even more layers to each of their fights, while making them even more personal. In fact, in the end, the student overcoming the teacher becomes the theme of their final battle, with Krauser doing the honorable warrior thing of accepting his defeat and the fate that comes after it at the hands of his stronger opponent. He submits to the strongest, which is something very much in character for him. Krauser goes on to finally acknowledge Leon by calling him by his name for the first time, and saying that he trained him well, with Leon responding that he sure did, and he calls him Major again, which is something he stopped doing after their first reunion. So they ended up respecting each other and accepting the bond that binds them. Krauser's knife, which Leon gets to keep like in the original, though this time he can actually wield it outside of one cutscene, is both a graduation present and an inheritance of Krauser's will and the teachings. Leon turning around one last time to look at Krauser's body shows that Leon wishes that things could have been different. You honestly end up feeling kind of bad for Krauser, and you also wish that things could have ended differently. Also, this conclusion to the final battle with Krauser, so powerful and rife with meaning and significance, is leagues better than what happened in the original game instead, where he just died unceremoniously, with Leon wondering, in passing, what happened to Krauser, since he used to be a good guy. But this is only if you interact with his body, and it's not even voiced or a cutscene. So it's very lackluster, especially by comparison to the remake. Finally, Krauser's reason for helping the Los Iluminados in the remake is purely his lust for unadulterated power, which is motivated by what happened in Operation Javier, thus giving the reason for his actions more weight and personal meaning than in the original, thus making him a more memorable and almost sympathetic villain. Also in the remake, he is not connected to Umbrella or Wesker or Ada, unlike in the original, which I think is a good change, since again, it's more in character for him to be motivated by his own greed and thirst for power, instead of having him operate for the sake of a cause or someone else, or because he was told to.
Welcome, my children. I am Osmund Sadler, the speaker for our Lord.
Now, Sadler definitely got a lot more screen time in the original game, and he had more dialogue as well. But despite getting less time to shine in the remake, I still think that he is better in it, due to several reasons, which all add up to the same result. He was just put to better use in the remake, and he was both better designed and a better character in it. Design-wise, in the original game, he was basically just a normal looking man, other than having sharp nails. There was nothing notable about him, even once he took off his hood. In the remake, however, his hood is removed almost immediately to reveal a twisted and bizarre visage, thanks to the horrific spikes growing behind his head. This new design makes him more memorable and terrifying. Even his face is now more menacing and filled with insanity. Character-wise, he was cheesy and kind of goofy in the original game, since he cracked a few too many jokes. He He said that he wanted to get money in exchange for Ashley, since running a cult is not cheap, and he had a personal vendetta and grudge against the US. He felt, ironically, like a cliché bad guy, one oozing with the exaggerated and cartoonish charm that permeated the original game. It was, honestly, difficult to take him seriously. However, in the remake, he is purely and simply evil. A madman driven to insanity by the power he wields. An egotistical psychopath with delusions of grandeur. Of being a god that controls everyone and everything, and one who believes that he is right. That his goal is something he very much deserves and is entitled to. He even calls it a humble wish. The way he thinks, talks, looks, sounds, and acts just strikes fear in a way that his original incarnation never could. He truly feels like the face and the heart of something absolutely and completely evil. He really feels like the main antagonist. This is all made even more apparent by the fact that he gets to show more emotion. He gets to be more expressive, which gives more weight and character to everything he says and does. Additionally, his power and control over Las Plagas is shown much more convincingly in the remake, with him forcing Ashley to almost kill Leon not once, but twice. He also keeps Leon from moving several times, and both Leon and Ashley get to have a Saddler talk to them directly from inside their minds, with Leon even seeing hallucinations at one point due to Saddler's influence. Saddler also visibly commands the ganado remotely. All these things make him truly feel like the mastermind, the one in control, the one pulling the strings, while also making him feel more powerful, nefarious, and dangerous. Finally, his boss fight is better in the remake. He looks more menacing. He can now summon a swarm of Novistadors from atop a big platform, which is so epic, and it sells the fact that he is the ruler of Las Plagas and its subjects. He also talks during the fight, unlike in the original game, thus adding more depth to his character, especially since he talks about his ambitious plan of uniting the entire world under one god, him. It's the classic bad guy monologue, but delivered during the fight instead of before. His exposition is even better because his voice becomes more and more distorted as the fight goes on, until he is left just wailing, thus showing that he loses more and more of his sanity until he is just a mindless monster. He is also just a lot more mobile and deadly, thus making the battle more intense and more difficult. Lastly, unlike in the original game, the fight ends with Saddler morphing into this crazy bundle of tentacles, which is then when you have to deliver the final strike with the special rocket launcher, which leads to a cutscene where Leon delivers the true final strike by straight up impaling Saddler with his own staff while delivering a classic action movie one-liner. This is just a more climactic and awesome way to end the final battle.
Joder, not this guy!
Who are you? Then stop right there!
Even the big cheese, Chief Bitores Mendez, gets extra shades to his character, with files and pictures found in his house detailing and showcasing life in the village prior to the arrival of the Los Iluminados and Las Plagas. He cared deeply about the village. He taught the children, he gathered with the other villagers in his house to talk about how to improve the village, and he was suspicious of the Los Iluminados. He wondered if trusting them was the right choice. You cannot help but feel a little bad for him in the remake, since while he is still a faithful servant of Sadler, meaning that he is, well, evil, we now know that he is essentially a victim. He was a good man who cared about those around him, but he was ultimately turned into a monster with no trace of the kindness and humanity he once had. He also gets to honor his new Mr. X-like design by chasing after you momentarily, which is great.
Mr. Kennedy.
Who the hell are you?
Me? Oh, please, call me Ramon.
Honestly, Salazar is the only character that was not improved in the remake. In fact, he suffered a downgrade in it. He is the only character that was made worse. Now don't get me wrong, I do love his new design, even if I miss the hat. And he is still wacky, wickedly charming, and cartoonishly evil, just like before, though to a lesser extent. The problem is that he has a lot less screen time and dialogue in the remake. In fact, some of his best lines / moments were cut, which is why his defining character traits feel less defined in the remake. All of this makes the castle section lack some personality and charm, since Salazar is a big part of why the castle is such a memorable location in the original. I do commend them though for making him less annoying and for keeping some of the best interactions with him from the original game alive in his vastly improved boss fight, more on this later, and in the names of several trophies.
Listen. Easy with that.
My name's Leon.
I honestly thought of not even including Leon, since he does not change that much. And of course, as the protagonist and the playable character, his screen time remains the same. He is present pretty much the entire game. However, I did want to mention that in the remake, he is more serious. While he still cracks jokes and one-liners like an 80s action hero,
Talk about sticking the landing.
he does so less in the remake, and some of his witty charm is gone. This all contributes into making the remake have a more mature tone, which might be a minus for many who enjoyed the original game's more boisterous tone. But I think that the remake does a good job of still keeping the charm of the original while adding a heavier tone that makes the adventure feel more sinister. like it is a more dangerous and horrific affair, which works better in this modern age where games tended to take themselves more seriously. Besides, the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3 also abandoned most of the campy charm of the originals in favor of more realistic and grittier horror. So it makes sense that Resident Evil 4 follows suit with its remake. Besides, the Leon in the Resident Evil 4 remake is the same Leon from the Resident Evil 2 remake. It makes sense that a darker, gorier, and more serious experience would breed a darker, more serious, and hardened protagonist. He even says so at the beginning of the Resident Evil 4 remake. He feels guilty for being one of the few that escaped the nightmare of Raccoon City. He wishes that he could have saved more people, that he could have done more, and he hopes that this time it will be different. This time, he will prevent another tragedy. He revisits this near the end of the remake while carrying Ashley to the device that removes Las Plagas. He says that this time, it has to be different. I love that the Leon in the remake is notably scarred by that fateful night, and this actively pushes him to fight. It makes him a more relatable protagonist and one you can root for more easily. Now, of course, apart from characters and the story, and still excluding things like graphics and sound, the remake improved on a ton of things. However, I will not list all of them. Otherwise, this video, which is already getting kind of long, will be well over an hour long. Instead, I will just list some of my favorite improvements. The knife went from being mostly a humble box and barrel opener and occasional power weapon to a badass skull opener, stealth killer, and a parry machine, while still retaining its container opening capabilities. The expansion to its role is just amazing, since it adds more nuance to the combat by giving you more ways to fight back and more resources to manage. Plus, these improvements allowed them to make the first boss fight against Krauser much better by turning it from a cutscene with quick-time events into an actual nail-biting fight that tests your skills and reflexes. Speaking of improved boss fights, this fight and the aforementioned fights against the two El Gigante and the Saddler are not the only boss fights that are better in the remake. The Salazar boss battle is vastly superior, since his transformation is so much better. It does a finer job of keeping his character and personality while also allowing him to fly around instead of having him stuck on a wall. The result of these improvements is a battle that is more engaging, difficult, and varied. The final battle against Krauser is made better by having him stalk you first with the transformation he had in the original game, only to then have him show up for the true battle with both arms transformed, unlike in the original game, thus making him more intimidating and imposing. Plus, you can parry him with the knife, thus making this iteration of the fight more intense. Now, they did not stop at just improving boss fights. They also added some new ones, namely the one against the armored El Gigante above the castle, which was a great surprise. The remake is overall better paced, since it has less fluff. It is constantly edging you forward, going from horrific set piece to horrific set piece without missing a beat, ensuring that you are always on the edge. The addition of side quests gives you something else to do apart from the main story, and it rewards and encourages backtracking, with previously visited areas sometimes sporting new surprises. Taking a page from Village, the remake lets you free roam to an extent, making the world feel bigger and more alive, which pairs beautifully with the side quests. The remake has new enemies, like the cow-headed brutes, and it adds new twists to returning enemies, such as the Regenerators, who morph into Iron Maidens when killed, and the Novistadors, who now camouflage instead of becoming invisible. So veteran players are always kept on edge, even when facing familiar foes. Finally, the remake has several weapons that were not in the original, and some returning weapons behave differently. So there are new ways to fight evil. Now there is one thing where the original definitely trumps the remake: atmosphere. After defeating Del Lago, nighttime arrives, which of course makes everything dark. There is also rain, or more specifically a thunderstorm, which only adds to the scary vibe. It's dark, rain blurs your vision, while also providing a haunting ambient sound. Thunder briefly lights up your surroundings, while also bringing a sudden sound that might serve as a jump scare. You hear a ganado shouting in the distance, but you can't see them. Maybe you can see a pair of red eyes walking towards you, or maybe they are briefly illuminated by the clap of thunder as they approach menacingly. In either case, this is terrifying. The original Resident Evil 4 might be the game that added action to a series that was once exclusively survivor horror, but it certainly did not forget its roots. While the remake is still scary, it is not as scary as the original, and its haunting atmosphere, which is something the remake cannot quite capture, is largely to blame for this. There are also some areas, moments, and set pieces from the original that did not make it into the remake, which is unfortunate since they are thoroughly enjoyable. Though the remake does include enough new things of its own to make up for any omissions. Additionally, I want to say that while the original might not hold up in terms of graphics or gameplay, its charm and the sheer joy of playing it still hold up very well. I had an absolute blast replaying it, even after playing through the remake several times. While at first I did miss modern conveniences like the ability to move while aiming, once I got used to the dated mechanics, I found myself falling in love and obsessing with the original all over again. I was reminded of why it was, and still is, such a genre-defining masterpiece and an absolute classic. So, it should be pretty clear by now that the remake is, for the most part, objectively the better game. The original does win in a few key areas, but overall, the remake is superior. And yet, it feels wrong to admit this, because personally, my attachment to the original is unyielding. The original was just such a special, one-of-a-kind game that it's almost impossible to top. The emotions and the feelings I had while playing it are nothing short of magical. And this is due to the fact that there really wasn't anything like it back then. Meaning that playing it was experiencing something unparalleled and without equal for the first time. Everything that came afterwards had to match up to such a monumental experience, which is honestly way too tall a task, even for an experience that is essentially the same but better. I guess it's true that you never forget your first. That original game, that first playthrough of it, is just engraved so deeply into my soul that it's simply unforgettable and irreplaceable. So, which Resident Evil 4 is better? Well, objectively, the remake is better. But personally, the original is the best. Basically, my brain says remake, but my heart says original. But regardless of which one is the best, one thing is for sure. Prior to the remake, Resident Evil 4 was the best and my favorite Resident Evil game. And now, after the remake, this fact still holds true, and it likely will remain true for years to come, if not forever.
Hasta luego.